Well, welcome to the 700 Club, a president for all Americans. That's the campaign promise of Joe Biden. So far, not so much. From day one, the administration has been backing bills that are anathema to Republicans. Well, just how far will the Democrats go? And what can the Republicans do to stop them? Our Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson brings us this report.
Democrats hope to deliver on a bold agenda while they have control of the House, Senate, and White House. But they won't get there without 60 votes in the Senate and a little support from the GOP.
We've got to bring our country together. We really do.
Democrats passed their nearly $2 trillion coronavirus relief bill through budget reconciliation, which needs just a simple majority in the Senate. But Senator Joe Manchin says he wants GOP input on future bills.
I'm not willing to go into reconciliation until we at least give bipartisanship or get working together or allow the Senate to do its job. Just by assuming that, hey, they'll never work with us. That's the other side. Right. This is tribal.
The Biden administration plans to roll out $3 trillion worth of infrastructure and climate change proposals. But the plans reportedly come with tax increases Republicans aren't likely to support. Democrats are also backing a D.C. statehood bill, which would create 2 additional Senate seats if signed into law.
In fact, D.C. residents have been fighting for voting rights in Congress and local autonomy for 219 years.
The House has already passed the Equality Act and a sweeping election reform bill. But as long as the Senate filibuster remains intact, neither bill is expected to clear the Senate. All this as the White House is facing a crisis on the border. New video showing massive overcrowding in detention centers. Internal documents revealing nearly 4,000 migrants in the Donna, Texas facility that is meant to hold just 250. Meanwhile, the president is pushing for congressional action on gun control measures after 18 people died in the shootings in Atlanta and Colorado this past week. Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Well, Oklahoma Senator James Lankford joins us from the Russell Rotunda to tell us more about the road ahead. And Senator, let me ask you this. Is there any possibility of some bipartisan support for any of the legislation, or is the idea to jam it down your throat?
Currently, they're trying to be able to just ram everything down our throat on it. Yes, there's absolutely places where we have bipartisan cooperation. Not everything is a partisan issue in Washington, D.C., nor across America. There are a lot of areas where we have common ground to be able to work on things together, but they seem to be just intent on trying to ram the most far-left policies through and to be able to find a way to be able to destroy the Senate. And when you talk about destroying the filibuster, you're really talking about destroying what the Senate has been for 200-plus years because they have an agenda to be able to change America into their image rather than to be able to function under who America is.
Well, you're looking at 2 senators, Manchin and Systema, that have got the hold. I mean, is there a possibility that they'll do away with the filibuster? Can it happen that you can see now?
It could happen here. They really need 51 votes to be able to do away with the filibuster. The filibuster is set up to make sure the minority voices always have a voice in America, and it's unique to the Senate. The House is a simple majority vote. Of course, the White House, everyone in the agencies do what the president asks them to do. In the Supreme Court, it's a majority vote. But in the Senate, both sides have to be able to have some cooperation together. You have to get 3/5 of the Senate, which is 60 votes, to be able to start debate on an issue or to be able to stop debate on an issue. That forces the bipartisan cooperation to make sure everyone in America is heard. Democrats will talk publicly about they want minority voices to be heard, but in the Senate, they're literally working to be able to stop the minority in the Senate from ever being heard. So the goal of this is a place that slows things down in the Senate, so we talk about it to make sure that we're dealing with the common ground issues that really define America.
You were down at the border recently. It looks like there's a narrative that there was no problem and it's not really a big problem. Now, is it really the crisis that we hear about?
It is a crisis, Pat. It's significant. I was in Arizona a week and a half ago to be able to look at the wall construction there of that whole system. As you know, President Biden, the first day he was in office, stopped wall construction that day and said no more can happen. Well, I got down to Arizona to see what does that look like. Literally, the fence is up for miles and miles and miles and miles, but all that's incomplete are the gates, these maintenance gates, so they can go on either side of the fencing to be able to maintain it. So you have these large openings that have not been put up. All the steel is there. So all it would take is a few days to be able to finish it, and President Biden stopped that. He also stopped the installation of the technology, cameras, lights, ground sensing technology, all of those things he stopped and said, we don't want to install those things anymore. Literally, we've already paid for it. All the materials are there. It's ready to go. But he stopped it. There's only one reason to be able to leave a fence up, but leave the gates open or to not install the technology. It's because he wants people to be able to come through that border. I'm headed to Texas this weekend where we've seen thousands and thousands of unaccompanied children coming across the border because President Biden on his first day in office said if you're 17 years old and down, you can come into the country now. That was prohibited during the Trump administration. Now President Biden has said if you're 17 and younger, you can come in. And so what has happened is we have thousands of people that are 17 and down, most of them 15, 16, 17-year-old males that are coming across the border. There's no facilities to be able to handle them, and they're releasing them into the country.
When you say they release him, I understand they're putting him on buses and taking him as far as like Midland and Texas and all the way into the heartland of America, then dropping them out. I mean, how could we sustain something like that?
Yeah, it's a terrible practice. What's the way they're set up right now is if let's say a 17-year-old guy comes across the border, he has a phone number of an uncle who lives in Chicago. He'll say, here's where I want to stay. They'll contact his uncle, do a background check on him. They don't verify whether they're also legally present in the country or not. And then they'll actually take them to Chicago and drop them off there. If they're an adult, 18 and older, they don't have any place to hold them anymore. So they're just releasing them into the towns that are nearby and saying, show up for a court hearing in some future date. Or for the first time ever, the Biden team is saying, we don't have time to be able to pick a court date for you. We'll contact you later to be able to get you a court date. And they're just releasing them into the country with no way to actually be able to contact them. So these are people literally crossing the border illegally as adults that are being released into the country, or that are 17 years old that they're actually transitioning to another relative that's in the country also illegally and saying show up for a court hearing 2 years from now, which obviously most of those folks don't show up for the hearings.
That's a horrible situation. Let me ask you something else. The Democratic agenda includes D.C. statehood. So if they give statehood to D.C., which it should take a majority of the votes to do it, but apparently they can do it with a simple majority, that gives them 2 more senators. Then they're talking about statehood for Puerto Rico, which is 2 more. They decide that that'll flip the ballots almost permanently. What can you all do to stop that?
Yeah, we need to continue to be able to stand up and speak out on this issue. This is not about giving voting rights to people in Washington, D.C. This is about taking over the Senate, adding more Democratic senators into D.C. Washington, D.C. is 1/10 of the size of my hometown of Oklahoma City. 1/10 of the size. They're talking about making a state from a city. If the people of Washington, D.C. want to be able to have access to more voting rights, then Washington, D.C. can be absorbed into Maryland. The southern part of Washington, D.C. decades and decades ago was absorbed into Virginia. We can take the rest of Washington, D.C., absorb it into Maryland, and so those folks can have separate voting rights on it, but keep then the core of Washington, D.C. still the district. So we've changed the boundaries of the district before decades ago. That's perfectly fine, but creating an entirely new state out of the District of Columbia is inconsistent with the United States Constitution, and it just begs the definition of what a state really is. For something so tiny as a small city of Washington, D.C. to be defined as a state should not be what we do. So I have no problem with those folks actually getting a voting right, but they need to become part of Maryland as the southern part of D.C. became part of Virginia years ago. That's a better way to be able to do it.
Senator, I understand the North Koreans just launched a missile. They're going to test us. The Chinese are testing us in Taiwan. We're being tested right around the globe. Do you think the president is up to the task?
Well, we're about about to find out on that. Our Secretary of State met with Chinese leadership in Alaska just last weekend, and the Chinese stepped up and just gave a tongue lashing to the United States, of which our Secretary of State did not stand up for a defense of who we are as Americans. And so clearly the Chinese are pressing on the United States to be able to back off and leave them alone while they are stripping houses of worship from their freedom. They're imprisoning Muslims in a section of China and putting them in concentration re-education camps, all kinds of human rights violations that are there, obviously stealing our intellectual property from us as a country. And they continue to be able to press against Hong Kong. The people of Hong Kong have lost their freedom entirely in just the last few months, and the last bastion of that was stripped away. So yes, China is definitely on the move. The United States needs to be able to step up to this and to be able to speak out forcefully for basic human rights and dignities for the Chinese people.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. God bless you. Thank you.
God bless you as well. Good to talk to you again.
Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, a distinguished member of that body, and I hope there are many more like him in the Congress. Well, in other news, so far another stalemate in Israel's elections. Apparently there's no clear winner, but there's a surprising party that might play kingmaker. John Jessup has more on that.
That is right, Pat. The vote count is still going in Israel's pivotal election. As of now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu does not have a straightforward path to a 61-seat majority in the Knesset. On the left, Yair Lapid's party was the big winner. He led the bloc of parties who want to topple Netanyahu, cobbling together just under 61 seats. One possibility for Netanyahu would be to make a deal with the Islamist Ra'am party, which appears to have 5 seats. That party's leader says he'll make a deal with whoever presents the best offer. Even with these divided results, some say the country won't tolerate a 5th election.
I think the country and, frankly, the political leaders want to have a certain amount of stability. Frankly, if we're trying to put together the country itself wanting to function.
The next several days will be critical as absentee ballots could shift the balance of power one way or the other. Well, a foreign challenge for the Biden administration coming from the North Korean regime. It reportedly launched multiple short-range missiles over the weekend. The launches are seen as a message to President Biden by dictator Kim Jong-un. Last week, his sister Kim Yo-jong warning the administration that if the U.S. wants peace, quote, it had better refrain from causing a stink, end quote. President Biden says the tests are nothing new. A State Department spokesperson said the president wants a new approach to North Korea, but gave no details. Well, we are learning more about the suspect in custody for the Colorado mass shooting that left 10 people dead. The 21-year-old suspect is a Syrian-born American who came here at the age of 3. So far, there is no known motive for the attack. But a family member reportedly described him as mentally ill and very antisocial since high school. The victims include Ricky Olds, the 25-year-old manager of the King Soopers, 59-year-old Suzanne Fountain, an actress, and Pat, 65-year-old Jody Waters, a grandmother. Just very, very sad accounts there.
Well, it's a terrible thing to think about, you know. But what they're talking immediately, they've got a man who's mentally sick. He's Syrian-born. He might be influenced by Islam. So he opens fire. So the immediate response from the federal government and the Senate and others, or at least the Democrats, are, well, let's have gun control. Let's do away with the Second Amendment. I don't think so. You know, as one senator I heard on the air said, look, you have how many deaths because of automobile accidents? And do you stop all the safe drivers because of a few crazies that run their cars improperly? They now have background checks. They have bans on automatic weapons and bump stocks and that kind of thing. And I don't think anybody needs to have an assault weapon to say he's going to live on the Second Amendment. And they certainly should have a background check to see if somebody's crazy or not before he gets a firearm. That they're talking about. But what they really want to do is to make all guns registered. And once the honest people have to register their guns, then the criminals will be the ones that will be unregistered. And it'll be a nation, it's not lawless now, it's going to be much more so. And I think we ought to fight for the Second Amendment and not allow anything like this to happen. The Supreme Court has already ruled in relation to the Second Amendment that it's not just for a militia. The Second Amendment says that, in order do we have an order or a militia, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be abridged. But the Supreme Court says, well, that does not limit guns only to militias. It is a personal right. And just because there's somebody out of his mind who shoots people, I don't think we ought to take the guns away from everybody else. So anyhow, so much for the gun lobby, but I'm afraid the NRA has not covered themselves with glory and all this stuff. They were the most powerful lobby around, and they have had some serious economic issues that have come up that I think has discredited the great work they have done in the past.